What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. The Beyond UX Design shop is open. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some of my favorite UX and software-related quotes and get some digital downloads. You can print them out yourself. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop and get your print on. This week's episode is brought to you by Wix Studio. Career shifters, people building portfolios and case studies, web designers, this one is for you. I've only got a minute to tell you all about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do from start to finish in 1 minute or less on Studio. You can adapt designs for every device with responsive AI. You can reuse assets like templates, widgets, sections, and design libraries across all your sites and share them with your team. You can switch up styling of hundreds of web pages. That means fonts, layouts, colors, all in a click. You can add no-code animations and gradient backgrounds right in the editor. You can export your designs from Figma to Wix Studio in just a click. And one more big one, package and deliver everything your clients need in one smooth handover. Time's up, but the list keeps going on. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/Wix and start creating today. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are regular here, you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, and Marty for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. You can get instant access right now to the video archives for as little as $5 a month. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So if you're scrolling on LinkedIn, without a doubt, I'm willing to bet every other post it's going to be something like niche down. And then the other one's going to say be a generalist, and the other one's going to say niche down, be a generalist, niche down, blah, 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 whatever. But what if you did both? What if you could double diamond your career and go broad and then go deep? We're going to talk all about that today with Scott Christensen, and I am really excited to have Scott on the show. Shoot, where's your bio, Scott? Where'd it go? There it is. All right. So I'm really excited to have Scott on the show today. Scott is the lead growth designer at Mercury, the fintech startup bank. He co-founded the growthdesigners.co community in 2018, and he's helped grow the community to nearly 3,000 growth design practitioners, making it one of, if not the largest community of practice in the niche design field. And as a product design leader with over a decade of experience, Scott cut his teeth as a self-taught designer before boot camps and UX degrees were a thing. Having a passion for business strategy and armed with a business management degree, he's uniquely positioned himself to apply his design skill set to business. He's uniquely positioned himself to apply his design skill set to business growth. And before specializing in growth, Scott held a variety of roles across the design spectrum in his 10-plus year career. He managed a design team at Expedia. He's worked in multiple startups as the head of design at a Series C healthcare startup, as well as the founding designer at a seed stage startup. Earlier in his career, he was a design consultant for enterprise companies like Microsoft, Fidelity, and other Fortune 100 companies. And furthermore, he's been a design freelancer, coach, and mentor. Needless to say, Scott has taken quite the pragmatic approach to advancing his design career. And in his free time, he enjoys doing the dad life with his toddler son and newborn daughter, donning spandex for endurance sports, exploring the mountains, and volunteering at a local youth group in his neighborhood in downtown Salt Lake City. Scott, welcome to Beyond UX Design. You sound like a busy guy. I don't know how you found time to do this episode with me today, but welcome to Beyond UX Design. I'm so excited to have you on. How's it going, man?
Great, it's great. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. So you've got an interesting backstory. You know, business degree, self-taught designer. You've made your way to the growth design niche. But today we're going to talk about how maybe niching down isn't exactly the best approach early on in your career. We're going to talk about going broad and then going deep. Tell me a little bit about your backstory. How'd you get from business degree into UX design, self-taught, and then ultimately into this niche of growth design?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, it came down to I just followed some passions of mine. So when I first began my career, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And, I had studied business because that was probably like the best route at that point in my life that I felt like. And then from there, I'd always had a passion for design. I didn't really know what it was. My school that I went to didn't offer any design. I didn't really come from like a design-oriented family. Although in hindsight now, I feel like I had always kind of had design-minded parents, but it just wasn't something that was within the realm of like reality growing up. So it was very much a pragmatic approach that I took in the first 5 years, 10 years of my career. Got exposed to designers when I was working as a management consultant for a company called PwC. That was my first job at a school, and I was working in customer experience consulting.
Company, yeah.
So
Right.
close cousin to UX design. So I started working with UX designers and thought, wow, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be into pixels. So I did a lot of storyboarding, a lot of, service design mapping, things like that, which actually served to be like a really good foundation for my career. And I still leverage those skills often, but eventually made the full switch, all self-taught, was able to basically learn on the job at PwC. They had an internal accelerator.
Wow. Okay.
So that was very fortunate. That was like the days when boot camps were kind of just popping up. And I didn't really want to they weren't very vetted at the time. I felt like they were kind of, the early Wild Wild West days. And so anyways, it was a very pragmatic approach. It was something I just kind of followed some of the interests that I had and the opportunities that were presented, and I eventually maneuvered my way into design. And then within that, since, navigating my career since then, I've been able to blend both design and business within the field of growth. Once I got exposed to that, I was like, yes, this clicks. This is what I want to do.
I love that, man. Yeah. Well, it's cool because you had I think maybe the right intro into UX design, which was understanding business and how the pixels on the screen actually impact business versus the other way around, which is just designing the pixels on the screen more subjective. I like blue. I like this border radius. And why doesn't anybody else like this color? And then, get executives like explaining why you picked the border radius. So the executives probably couldn't care less about that. And so I think you probably went in like maybe the right way. I think that's probably how more design education should probably be, is, through that lens, and how those interactions and UIs actually support the business. But anyway, I love that. So we're talking today. Obviously, you've niched down into the growth design. You run Growth Design School, which obviously is helping people learn that niche of growth design. But your argument is that for early designers, niching down too early is probably not a good idea as far as your career growth goes. So explain to me a little bit why someone who's so focused on a niche would be advocating this idea that, hey, don't niche down early, go broad, learn the skills, and then niche down. So tell me a little bit about that. What's wrong with niching down early from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a little counterintuitive from someone who is kind of like focused on a niche, like you said. But from my perspective, when I've worked with designers who are working in the growth niche at various companies that I've been at, the earlier they are, there's a few things that earlier they are in their career, there's a few things that happen that I think are maybe not always the best. So first, earlier in your career, like you just kind of don't know what you don't know. There's like this framework in psychology. There's a psychological framework that I like to use that mostly for myself, but you start in this quadrant of like unconscious incompetence. You're kind of unaware that you lack skills and proficiency in like the wide spectrum of design. And so if you specialize too early, you start to become maybe like over dependent on your single lens of the world, which would be growth if you are a growth designer, like say in your first couple years of your career. And so you start to see everything becomes maybe tainted with that lens. So
you form that bias around the things that you have come to know, thinking it's everything, and then you've basically built up a bias for that thing when in reality there's so much more out there, but you don't even know that. So you're just kind of focusing everything through that bias, right? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm thinking of a few designers specifically where, they were they're maybe more persuaded to be more business oriented than user oriented. And that's kind of the tug and pull of a growth designer, right? Is you're trying to
Interesting, yeah.
meet and marry both user and business goals. You're working to design flows and interactions to meet certain metrics. A lot of product teams also work to this, but like as a generalist product designer, you're typically just trying to build capabilities, like vertical capabilities, rather than like enhancing those capabilities and like deepening usage or adoption and retention of those features or capabilities of your product. So I've just seen a couple designers who, start to say like things that I don't think a designer ever has, like, they don't teach it in design school, that's for sure, but they'll say things like, well, I just think this would move the metric a lot more. Like this kind of grayish dark pattern would really, and it's like, oh yeah, well, no duh, like that would definitely, move the metric if you only give them, one option here. But rather than the, equally balanced options of things maybe you don't want them to do, say.
Yeah, I love that. I kind of, when I think about this, one of the things I think about is this idea of Socratic ignorance, right? Like the only thing I know is that I know nothing. And I think, this is something that designers in general, I think anybody, honestly, regardless of your profession, should live life this way. But, thinking about the fact that you really don't know everything and there's always more to learn. And I think when you niche down, especially early, you sort of, I think, lose sight of that, right? You don't realize that there's not more because you think it's just everything is this niche. And not to say everybody that niches down early does this, but I think you risk that. And then, like you said, like through the bias, and you form that bias, and everything is formed like through the lens. You mentioned that framework. Is that like something you apply in growth design school, where you teach people
Not
this, or is this just like
I think
a
it was
general
just
thing?
more of a framework for life.
Okay.
But yeah, you kind of start in that quadrant of like unconscious incompetence where you're not really sure of what you don't know. And then you move on to something like a quadrant of like conscious incompetence where you begin to say, I actually do, I'm aware and I do understand that I am not proficient in this skill. So you
Right.
start to
Right.
become aware of like the spectrum of design and what else is out there. And then from that, you move into kind of the stage of like conscious competence where you start to say like, oh, I'm actually like, I understand the spectrum of design. I understand where, the skill of, say, growth design fits in the greater scheme of things. At that point, you're probably, 5-10 years into your career or something along those lines, where you're more of a senior designer, where you've worked on multiple products. You've started to see like where these, how everything fits in. And then from there, as you progress in your career, you kind of get to this point of like unconscious competence, where it's just like automatic. You don't even really have to think about it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you just understand that where you fit in. You don't have to like critically think about it and like really stress about it. Like it just kind of comes automatically for you.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a cool framework. Yeah, I'll have to like maybe share that framework in the show notes, because I think that's maybe something that a lot of junior designers probably aren't really conscious of. And I think it's worth, because everybody kind of goes through these phases as they progress through their career. And I think it's one of those things, like naming these quadrants and naming those phases is a valuable thing, I'm sure, so you can maybe start to recognize it and say, hey, like I'm actually in unconscious incompetence. Like I actually, the Dunning-Kruger
Yeah.
Mount Stupid is kind of what I think of, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And like I'm at the
it's a
peak of
framework
Mount
for
Stupid right now, but I have no idea.
exactly. It's really a framework for just learning in general.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to be about design, or it's just anything in life where you start off where you don't know what you don't know, and then you move to a spot where you start to understand. You have that aha moment where you're like, this is where I fit in.
Mhm.
This is why maybe it's not feeling right, or like this is why this feels natural and intuitive to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. Well, because this is obviously like what we want to talk about today is sort of that maybe unconscious incompetence thing, where you think early on in your career, I'm going to go focus on this one thing, but there's value in going broad. So we talked about like sort of maybe the pitfalls of niching down too early. What do you, from your perspective, like the value in going broad early? Like I said, going broad, double diming your career, going broad and diverging before you converge. Where's some value, like from your perspective? What's the value in doing that for like a younger designer?
Yeah, for sure. I maybe the analogy of like other fields might help elucidate this. we go to college, we get general education there, and like,
Hmm.
why do we do that? Like, we get like, I took biology classes and physical science classes. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
really a science guy, and but it's still like, like, it's at a 101 level, then it's come to help me down in my life. I don't really know. I don't have like a biology like example off the top of my head. I guess I knew what mitochondria was when I went to
Yeah,
the
yeah, sure.
Natural History Museum with my son the other day. But like,
That helps.
we there's a purpose for general education in academia. And then I also look at like, um, my I have a brother-in-law and my roommate from college who went into the medical field, and they are just now starting their first jobs. 10 plus years later after school.
Just school.
They went obviously did their undergrad. They went to medical school. They did residencies, and a lot of doctors go do fellowships, post, additional posts. Like, if you're becoming a researcher, like, you do another route, but you all start in general medical school. Like, in medical, not that I've been, but I've talked to folks
I
who
know people.
have.
Yeah.
I know some people, but like, yeah, like, you go to learn a general education around all things medical school, and then you start to niche down. And I think it just gives an appreciation and an understanding of like, what is this field that I'm entering, and it helps you to connect the dots and become that much better of a designer down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is interesting because we talk about boot camps and we talk about a lot of people talk about gatekeeping and things like that, and I see like so much parallel between, or maybe anti-parallel. I don't know what's the right word there. I guess the perpendicular of how UX is taught and design is taught, and how a skill like medicine or law or something like that is taught, where you go to school for a long time, like you said, you do general practice for a very long time, and you learn that, you do the rotations and you learn all these different things before you ever decide, I want to be a podiatrist, or I want to be an ENT or something, right? You don't just go to school. I don't, well, maybe some people like, I have always wanted to be an ENT, since
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid. I just want to deal with noses and throats and ears. And, you go to school and that's all you learn about, and you never learn about internal systems and all the other things. And,
Yeah.
how on earth could a doctor be a good doctor if they never learn those things?
Yeah.
You know,
I'm actually a
so,
little leery of people who just like know what they want to do and just like do it. I
mhm.
feel like people can put blinders on if they have that kind of. And for those of you who maybe have done that in your career, you just always knew what you wanted to do. I'm not necessarily bagging on that, but
Yeah,
I
sure.
do think that you can start to narrow your focus
Mm.
and start to maybe miss out on opportunities and tangential paths, and things that could really benefit you early on in your career, and just be open to kind of like growth mindset of like, what else can I learn, or where else could I take my career? Because I do think we have like multiple careers within our adult life, right?
Mm.
Like, I, I would be remiss to say that like, I always want to be an individual contributor my entire life at a Series B, Series C startup or something like that. Like, we get to the point where again, like, we start to get to that unconscious competence where you're just like super comfortable in your own skin, know the ins and outs of the industry that you're in, or the job, or the company that you're at. And we start to feel the itch, right, to move on and try something new. And I think it's no surprise that like people do job hop quite often within tech. And I don't know if that's necessarily because it's like, let me pause on that, gather my thoughts.
Go for it.
Why don't we just come to that later?
Yeah, no sweat. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting too, because one of the things I think about when I think about comparison, I know, kind of going off topic a little bit, but I do think it's sort of related. We look at law, architecture, medical, and you have to have these gatekeepers that say like you have learned an adequate amount to then get a license to do a thing. And in UX design and general software development, there is no gatekeeper. Right? There's no
Yeah.
one stopping anyone from getting a job, which on one hand is good. On the other hand, though, you get, just like you said, the pitfalls, like you get laser focused on the thing and then you get a job doing that thing. Are you as effective as others? And there is nobody stopping you and saying like, well, hold on, you didn't learn these other things that would make you an effective designer, right? There is really no definition of effective designer like they have. Like, I've studied these things and I've passed these tests and I've gotten a certain amount of grades, whatever. We don't really have that in UX design, for better or worse. And so there's nobody kind of stopping you, which is kind of interesting. It's like, if you don't do this self-reflection on your own, you could spend years and years of your career maybe wasted doing these things. I think this is like such an important thing to kind of think about. We don't have those safeguards in place, which, maybe on one hand is good, but on the other hand, it's very risky for individuals when they don't think about these things. So maybe like gatekeep yourself, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, when you're just told by your design manager or design leadership, or if you're a solo designer, you just kind of, work with your small team there, and you're just told what to build. Like, you just kind of put that critical thinking hat in the background. That could really come back to bite you if you don't take a pause every once in a while to really critically think about your career. And I'll just tell a personal anecdote. I led the design team at a Series C startup in healthcare, and then when 2022 came around with all the layoffs, all kind of middle management and leadership kind of got trimmed at the company, myself included. And I'll tell you granted, there was some severance, but there was also some anxiety-filled months there where I was like, what am I doing with my career? Like, where am I going next? And it took me, 6-7 months to land my next role, but I would say those 6 to 7 months were some of the biggest months of career growth for myself, because I really had to think hard about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with my career. And I wasn't just being told, here's the OKRs and here's where we need to take the product, and which is so easy to just execute. Maybe not easy, but
straightforward. Yeah.
You don't have to have as much critical thought, and it's easy to just kind of plug and play and then focus on your hobbies on the nights and weekends, and
yeah, exactly,
just move forward. But I digress on that. But I do think that if you are getting maybe specialized early on in your career, you can take a similar approach where you can take a step back. Hopefully it doesn't take a layoff to do that, though.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was thinking, like, you mentioned this idea of plug and play, and you mentioned this idea just sort of like just going through the motions. When you get to that quadrant, like you mentioned, of like unconscious competence, I think it's really easy to fall into that trap of just being comfortable. It's just easy. I can do my job without thinking. It's not very challenging. There's a couple of things there too. Like, one, it's like if you get laid off and you can't find a job doing that exact same thing and you haven't really learned any of these other skills, it makes it really hard to be valuable to another team. One. Then in the other, you're not growing necessarily, and you get to that point if you aren't actively trying to get back to that other quadrant, right, of maybe unconscious incompetence and learning new skills. It's sort of really easy, I think, to just sort of coast and go further and further up that line, if we think about it like a chart, right? And you got to really like push yourself, I think, to kind of like, there's almost like a gravity pulling you to that top right quadrant, and you've really got to fight against that current. I'm using different analogies here, gravity and current and stuff. You know what I'm trying to say, to get back to that sort of left-hand side.
I took physical science 100 in college, so I know.
Yeah, there you go. I've heard about gravity. I heard that's a thing. So anyway, I don't know. I just like want to call that out. I think that's, I don't know if you have any other thoughts about that, but I think that's like a really interesting thing to think about. Is like really easy to fall into that sort of quadrant of going through the motions. The more you do your job, the easier that job gets. And what happens when you get laid off and you're not, you have to then, like, I don't know, bust your ass 7-8 months, like you said, like learning new things, growing to find another job.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to think about. It's definitely worth considering well before you get laid off.
Yeah. And, we hear the T-shaped designer analogy often, and I do subscribe to that. I think that's something that you should definitely be trying to develop, going wide, so that you do keep your options open in case, the worst does come around where you have to find something new. But I do, and maybe this is a good time to maybe pivot, because I do think specialization is highly critical for you to advance in your career at some point. And the reason I say that is because of 3 things. I think specialization can give you a professional foothold. It can really allow you to be known for something. I mean, the unfortunate truth is that people don't really care about your career. Other people don't really know what your goals are unless you've shared them with them. But even then, like, it's up to you. Like, and so specialization gives you maybe a power in people can understand who you're about. Like at work, it's like Scott's known as like, yeah, you like do gross stuff, right? It's like that's the one
Gross stuff.
thing that people probably think of Scott at Mercury, right? Yeah, it's just like,
Right.
yeah, Scott, and you got to think about it. Like when you think of other people, you probably only know one or two things that they're interested or passionate about, and the same goes for you. And so at some point, you got to specialize, in my mind. Otherwise, you're not really known for anything. But, and again, that needs to come later in your career, because the earlier you specialize, I think, the more you could be kind of, as we've talked about before, the more you could kind of be damaging your professional aspirations, and also not really knowing the whole spectrum of design there.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead. Sorry.
You could probably edit that out, but I kind of rambled on that one.
Well, I want to. Yeah, no problem. So I'd love to get into this a little bit is from your perspective. You're giving advice to junior designers, getting that broad skill set. The thing is, when I think we tell a lot of designers like, oh, it's going to take you X amount of time. It's going to take years. They're going to be like, oh my God, I don't have years. I want to do it now. Everybody wants to do. They want to level up now. They want to. Yeah. So tell me a little bit of, like, from your perspective, the advice that you would give for those people before they niche down. What is Scott's advice for getting that general skill set? And maybe even, this is a follow-up question after that, but how do you know when you've had enough? Thinking about that sort of Socratic ignorance, you never really know what you don't know. So how do you know that you've learned enough to then move on to the niche? Or is that just, you just sort of take a risk? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, maybe I'll
tell me about that.
Advice
for junior designers that are thinking about this. What do you give them?
So and this probably is, I'm maybe rehashing some. I would claim that this is my philosophy, but I do think there's a couple key things that you can do to gain a broad skill set fast. Like there's a couple proven ways. You could find a rocket ship, a startup that's growing like crazy, get in there and just take a seat on the rocket ship, as they say, right? And just start to maneuver whatever that job is, get in there. And as they hyperscale, you can maneuver and start to see a lot of different, different positions within the design realm. And you can start to see a lot of impact from your. So that's one way. Those are somewhat few and far between to come across, and somewhat lucky, I think, if you want to get in before it becomes a rocket ship.
You never really know when it's going to be. I mean, if you knew that, then you're like, you don't even need to. You don't even get a job. Just give
crash and burn.
Yeah, give them $10,000 and just sit on the returns for your entire life. You don't even need a job if you knew which one was the rocket ship.
Yeah. That said, I do think being a solo designer, like a really small seed stage startup, I think is great for gaining a broad skill set. But it's also, I actually think there's less upside in that than finding something that's a little bit more established. And the reason I say that is just you don't have a framework of mentorship in that company. Yeah. You don't have a design manager. Absolutely. You don't have somebody who's going to just say like, hey, actually you're doing this way off. Like, here's how to course correct here. So I do think like finding, if you're at a seed stage, like early stage startup as a solo designer, like early in your career, that's totally normal. Like that happens a lot because they are more willing. First off, they don't have to pay you as much. They tend to have more junior designers.
Yeah.
And then secondly, they allow maybe people with less experience they're more willing to hire. But all that to say, like that supply will always be there early in your career. But if you can try to maneuver your way into something, job hop into a more structured design team or enterprise team, things like that, like you'll start to see a more holistic picture of design rather than staying as like a solo designer at a small seed stage startup.
Yeah, I love it. I like to use the analogy of learning how to do a backflip, right? You could go on YouTube, you could watch a bunch of videos, you could read about how to do a backflip, and then you could go in your backyard and you could try to do a backflip on your own. And you may do the backflip, you might break your neck, you might break your arm. But if you go to a gym and you have, a coach and they maybe have some safety equipment, put your back here. Oh no, you got to put your legs there. And they actually help you do the backflip or catch you before you fall on your head. You're going to learn how to do a backflip in a much safer environment, probably even a lot faster than you would going and doing it on your own. And I use this example all the time. Like my first UX job, I did advertising for a long time, self-taught designer and all that stuff. And I was like, you know what, I'm done with advertising. Went to get a job at a startup as the UX designer, the only UX designer there. I did that for 4 years and I'm thinking, top amount stupid. I'm like, I'm the best damn UX designer in the city. I don't know everything, blah, blah, blah. And then I get a job at a big company with a team of 20 something UX designers. And I realized I had no idea what I was doing. I was doing it wrong. I was like doing high fidelity stuff first. I wasn't talking to users until the end and all this stuff. And, I had no clue what I was doing. And I didn't actually start learning to be a UX designer until I got that job, I think, so I was doing it for a long time. Like you said, it's a job. You get a job, you want to do it. You could get lucky and learn. And I think now too, this was like, 2011. There weren't the YouTube videos. There wasn't as much stuff back then. So it was the amount of stuff a solo designer can learn, I think, is a lot more, better, deeper than when I was coming up, for sure. But that said, the mentorship is so important, like you said, having someone to guide you, learning from that team, if you can. That said, if all you can get is a job at a small startup and you're on your own, fair. But, like you said, maybe the tiny little startup where you're the first design hire isn't the best choice for your first or second job. Maybe it's a little bit larger company. Maybe enterprise is probably the wrong approach because you're not going to get that broad skill set. But maybe you find a smaller company. Anyway, I love that approach, and I love the caveat there. Startup is a great place to learn everything. You're wearing a ton of hats, but you might not be learning the right thing. You might not be. Yeah. You might have those hats on backwards or something, the whole time without even realizing it. The hat's inside out, and you didn't know it. So anyway, I don't know. I just love that analogy.
I'll just add one other thing because I think a lot of people may listen to this and be like, shoot, like that's where I am right now. Like I'm in a place where I maybe don't have the mentorship that I want. And I would just say to those folks, like, if you feel that, if you feel like, hey, I need to go like find a coach or pay somebody to like tell me, give me like honest feedback, like there is that option. I believe you do that. I also do that, but I also think like if you are feeling that itch, like that's telling you something that maybe you should change it up, right?
Absolutely.
And you should start to position yourself to join a different organization or something along those lines. So I'll just say in my experience, like thankfully had like an opportunity to get a like really broad experience at my first company that I worked at, PwC. It's like a multinational global corporation that had this like internal accelerator that taught me the 101 of design and product management and things. And then from there, I went to Expedia where I learned, enterprises and like with a 100, person design team. And then I had the itch at that point, and this is probably the point that I want to make, is like you start to feel it, you start to have the itch to go to something maybe completely opposite. I've pendulum swung so many times in my career because I went from Expedia to being a founding designer, of one. And so, on a small team of under 10, I was the only designer. And so it was like complete opposite end of the spectrum. And each of these experiences has really given me like a ton of different viewpoints. And I guess all I'm trying to say is like, if you feel the itch, I wouldn't necessarily like move every year, but like a couple of years at a job, like nowadays, like that's totally fine to just like bounce around, try something new every couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would add to that too is, don't be afraid to job hop. Like you said, maybe every year, maybe some people think that's a red flag, but even then, beyond just like the niching down versus general, just if I could give anybody like broad career advice, is do what's right for you. Do what feels right.
Yeah.
Like screw what other people think. If you have 6 months in a job and that's on your resume and like some company doesn't hire you because you were there for 6 months, then like, I don't know, fine. Like you're probably better off not working there anyway. So don't be ashamed of that if that's what you were doing. And if you can even explain, I felt stuck. Oh, I didn't think I was going to move up. I just like didn't like what we were doing and blah, blah, blah. And you have a good reason for job shifting and jumping around like that. I just don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Oh, it might be a red flag for some people, like I said, but I don't know. For me, that being a red flag is a red flag for a company. you know? So anyway, I
For sure.
like tacking that onto that advice. But so let me ask you this, dude. When you think about the double diamond, you look at it on a piece of paper, it's very clean and it's very even, and you know, this side, that side, it's all like symmetrical and stuff. But in reality, double diamonds are never like that. When you think about double diamonding your career, we talk about going broad and going deep, going broad and going deep. It's hard to maybe even give specifics here, but I'm curious, like from your perspective, is there a time frame where you kind of say, like, give yourself X amount of time to be a generalist and then spend X amount of time specializing in a thing, then go broad again, then maybe specialize in something new if we think about double diamond? You have a thought
Yeah.
there? Is it too hard to give specifics? I'm curious what you think.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be like overly prescriptive here. And I would say you at least need a couple years as a generalist. I'd say probably five.
Yeah, it's good.
First 5 years out of school, because again, like you start to become, you need the reps. Like you need to go to the design gym and see lots of different products being built. I'd say if you've worked on one product on one team in one specialty, that's you're going to see the whole world through that lens. So give it some time. I know that can be hard, especially early in my career. I remember having this constant itch to just like have the title. I was like, I need to be a senior designer and I need to work at XYZ company. And I don't know. I mean, yes, I think you need that kind of drive. And yes, you also need to be patient. And it's where you are now is the opportunity you have in front of you. So take advantage of it. Whatever you have, wherever you're working, there are things that you can learn. There are things that you can grow from. There are new things you can try. And so that's what I would recommend, is just take what you have in front of you, be patient with it, grow with it, try something new. And again, if you start to hit walls and be like, I'm just not getting where I want to be, then like we talked about, maybe job hopping is probably the right thing.
Yeah, I love it. So when I think about this idea of like a well-rounded designer, right? I think about all of the various things that one could do as a UX professional, research, visual design. Some people might even say identity branding would make you a well-rounded UX designer, typography skills, color theory, research, all this stuff, ethnography, qualitative, quantitative, anything you could think of. I'm just curious from your perspective, when someone's thinking about going broad, what types of skills would a well-rounded UX designer, from your perspective, what types of skills should that well-rounded UX designer have when they're thinking about going broad? Is there a generic skill set, or do you think it may be even different for every person? What are your thoughts?
I think everything you just listed and more, right? Like just, again, I don't want to be overly prescriptive about you. Like you need XYZ skills because I'm not the authority on that.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
and nor do I, like we talked about, there's no like checklists and things in general education. But I think just, taking wherever you are and enhancing and taking it one step higher, trying to learn from folks who have gone beyond. I don't know if there's specific, maybe edit. Yeah, let's edit this so I can count myself back.
Good. Take your time. It's all good.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think I don't know if I have an answer for that one.
Yeah, it's hard, man. It's kind of one of those things, like you said, it's hard to be super prescriptive. I mean, if I were giving my advice, I would definitely advise people to think about visual design, whatever that means, because I personally feel like as we progress through the digital age and AI and all this stuff, having great design taste, maybe not even being able to necessarily do it, but just the taste, like build your that design taste muscle, like know and recognize what is good and what is bad design. When do things look off? And I think to me that goes with spacing, it goes with topography, colors, and things like that. How do all these things fit together? And it's really easy to learn those things. I mean, I think about like Adam Donaway and his Practical UI book. I mean, there's so many just very simple tips and things like this looks good, this does not look good. Here's why this looks good, and here's why it doesn't, and how to do that stuff. And I think the visual design is a skill like any other skill. And a lot of people think, I'm not I'm not an artsy, I don't know the difference, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a load of crap. And I think you can learn that stuff very easily if you just try and practice. Research obviously is important, like understand how to talk to people, understand how to put together a survey that's not asking leading questions, how to ask questions so you're not getting the answers you want, you're getting the actual, those kinds of things I think are really important. information architecture is obviously critical. I mean, there's so many like things. I guess, like you said, it's like hard
Yeah.
to list them out. As I started
I
listening, I'm
think,
like, what am I doing? I don't know why I'm listing this out. It's going to be hard. But yeah.
well,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
to build off what you're saying there, Jeremy, I think at the core of it, like a designer is a visual
Yeah.
creative,
Yeah, for sure.
create visual experiences at the end of the day. And so if that core competency of your career is lacking, you're going to struggle. And so you need to have that foundation, like you're saying, of
Mm.
core visual and UX and interaction design skills.
Yeah.
But again, it does come down to, do you have, there's an element of like, do you have the design eye? Do you have taste when
Yeah.
it comes to like a visual experience? So, and then everything on top of that, I think is where you build, right? And maybe I'm coming at it from like a reverse background where I have like a business foundation and I had to
Yeah.
teach myself all those foundations, and it took me a while. I'll say the first couple jobs that I had, I was like learning so much. Whoa, like I had never, and I think that was kind of the way it was done maybe 10, 15 years ago, early days, Wild Wild West of like mobile and things like that. Like it's just, there was no standard. And I think we're definitely getting to a point now where I'm really impressed with some of the designers coming out into the workforce these days who
Yeah.
I'm like scared. I'm
Absolutely,
like, man,
dude.
these are
Yeah, I
good.
know.
Like they're so good. I'm like, I don't even know, like, I don't know if it's like they're using templates or something, or Figma Community or Figma
I don't
AI
know,
or something,
man.
but I'm like, dang, like,
Yeah.
these
I'm the
kids
same
are
way. I
good.
look at some of this stuff and I was like, damn, I am not as good as this person here. Yeah, that hits me all the time, man. Absolutely. You're not alone. So here's a question I have. When we think about this idea of going broad and going deep, I was thinking about this idea of, based on that kind of those quadrants that you kind of laid out, is this idea of like informed specialization. It's not just like specializing just to specialize. It's like in specializing for a reason, right? And I'm curious if you've thought about this. Like, when would a designer when do they? We talked a minute about going broad, and then when do they realize they need to go back deep? And then there's even the question. It's like, well, what do I pick? It could be like maybe you're just good at something, but then there might also be outside variables that you're taking into account that say like, well, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, therefore I should do A, B, and C. I'm curious, you ever thought about that, like picking a niche once you have gone broad? What do you think about? What do you tell people when this kind of topic comes up in conversation?
Yeah, I think you know it when you kind of come across, like you have this kind of clicking sensation where it's like, this really taps into like both my interests, but also like something that I'm really good at and I can make money at. Like those are the kind of the intersections, right? It's like, where is my natural intuition and like my natural strengths, and how does that intersect with like the opportunities that lay ahead of me? And so if those two are crossing, then I think you have like an opportunity to niche down. And maybe I'll like take this towards like growth, because this is where I've gone. So I can speak to this from like a personal perspective. But I think over time, I've come to have like 3 or 4 kind of heuristics as to like if you'd be a good growth designer. And a lot of these are like more business oriented. So if you find yourself feeling like you're a hybrid designer / PM, I think that's a good sign that maybe growth could be good for you. And the reason I say that is because growth designers are some of the more strategic designers that I've encountered. And the reason I say that is because they can connect business strategy and bring that down to the pixels and bridge that gap super easily, zooming in, zooming out on exactly that. Like, can you connect where the business is trying to take things? Are you intrigued by metrics? Like, do you use quantitative metrics to drive your design and your own personal creative process? I think that's another heuristic. One other is like, are you business and marketing inclined? Like, do you go to market strategies? Like, how do you sell your product? How does your product, like, how do you connect value? Like, you're selling something, you've created something, but like, how do you connect that to users so that they find that value? If that's something that interests you, then like growth could be interesting for you too. And then lastly, I think this is maybe one that's more general, but just like, are you interested in changing people's behavior? Like, not only are you like a craftsman of like, oh yeah, I like to build great product, but like, do I want to change people's behavior with this product? I can't hear you. Maybe did I knock something out? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can't hear me. Weird. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Weird. Can't hear you.
All right, action.
Okay. Yeah, I think the third heuristic that I prescribe to when it comes to at least specializing in growth, knowing that this is a field for you, is if you're finding yourself feeling like you're maybe go-to-market or marketing inclined, where you like to understand how not only how to build product, but also how to sell it, how to get it into the market and actually make change and changing people's behavior, right? Like not only are craftspeople of like building incredible experiences, but really connecting them to find the value. Are we helping users find true value and actually adopt the product rather than just like outputs, outcomes over outputs, that kind of a methodology. So those are some heuristics that I use for knowing if you want to specialize in growth. Something that I came to kind of understand personally when I had the opportunity to specialize. I was like, yeah, like this makes a lot of sense because these are the things that I care about.
Now, as you were going through those, talking about like, are you like a sort of hybrid product manager sort of thing? Well, one of the things I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about going broad, we talk about design, but going broad doesn't have to be limited to design. I mean, you could even go broad, take a class on product management, learn to code, see if that's something you enjoy doing. You could become, maybe later you focus and become like a UX engineer or something, design engineer. Yeah.
There's a lot of multidisciplinary designers out there for sure. And I think you should lean into that because you're highly like UX engineers, growth designers, PM designers, like super, super valuable in certain company settings for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to one of those things too, when you think about niching versus generalizing. You don't appeal to a lot of companies anymore. But the ones that you
start
would
to actually
appeal to,
say actively no to recruiters. And I think that's where there's a turning point in my career where I'm like, I used to say like, yeah, I'll field any interview, like, oh, you're a big name company, like, sure, I'll talk to the recruiting team if they reached out. Like back in 2021, the ZERP area, the ZERP time frame is what they call it, right? Where it's just like everybody was going gangbusters. I mean, hiring was insane. Like you'd have recruiters reaching out every week. So I was like, oh yeah, like sure, I'll talk to you. But there came a point where I was just like, I'd rather do design or growth design. And so no, like I actually don't want to talk to you. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to waste my time. Like I know what I want. And that's the thing. I think that's the core thing is like, you got to get to a point where you know what you want. Otherwise you're going to be scattershot. You're going to be saying yes to everything. You're going to be trying a lot of different things. When it comes to like applications, if you're looking for a new job, like you literally apply to every single design job that you can find, and it's exhausting. I coach a growth designer who is trying to find a new job, and he's like, I'm open to taking a new type of role. And so he's like, he told me his last like round, he like applied to like 200 companies and heard back from 10 and then got an interview with 3. And I was just like, that is exhausting. Like it is a hard market right now. I understand that. And you need to understand that you need to have at some point a focus so that you don't exhaust yourself completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. You might not appeal to every company, but the ones that you will appeal to are willing to pay you more. They're willing to invest in like that top talent who can do that thing because we need that exact skill. So anyway, I love this, man. But I want to, before we get out of here, I do want to talk a little bit about growth design school because obviously we're talking about niching down. If you do want to niche down in growth design, obviously growth design school I think is one of the best places to go and do that. Before we talk about growth design school, anything else that we didn't get a chance to talk about as it relates to that double diamonding? Is that even a word we'll coin it today?
No, I guess
double diamonding your career.
Yeah, the last thing is just take a pragmatic approach. Like, don't feel like you're ever failing. Any experience is good experience. And I took a lot of roads that, in hindsight, I'm like, that wasn't like what that wasn't how I would have wanted it to go, but it did go that way. And like, just take advantage of what's in front of you. And, I pivoted when I felt it was right. And other times it was pivoted upon me. Things happened in your career that you don't always expect. But do be prepared, be that T-shaped designer, double diamond your career, have enough depth of generalization that you can kind of go in different directions, but also have a very pointed opinion on what you really care about and what you want to specialize in eventually.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking about like, failing inside, I came across this quote a while ago from Thomas Edison, and it was like something, I'm paraphrasing, it was like, I've never failed. I've only found 10,000 ways that won't work or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And, it's just like you could say 10,000 times, like, get electricity work or whatever it was, light bulb. I'm not sure exactly what he was talking about, but, he didn't fail 10,000 times. He found 10,000 ways that like it wouldn't work. And so that's just one more step towards figuring out the way that will work. And I think that's a growth mindset is such an important thing to think about. Just, I don't know, for everything, your career obviously being one. So I want to talk a little bit about just growth. Yeah, exactly. I want to talk a little bit about Growth Design School and give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about that. So you guys, help people niche down, and specifically, obviously, growth design. I assume that's what you're learning in Growth Design School. And you guys, I think you have a cohort coming up soon. You want to talk a little bit about that? You're welcome to give that a plug if you'd like to chat about that.
So Growth Design School it's a unique blend of fully remote learning. We include, 5 hours of asynchronous content that we've recorded, and a handful of other like experienced growth designers teach the course. It's 3 of us. And then we have guest speakers as well. So we have a guest teacher from Pinterest, growth designer from Pinterest that will be joining us. And this is a, pretty common thing that we do. We run these twice a year. We have case studies, customized assignments, collaborative debriefs. I think that one of the biggest things is like you can do a lot of asynchronous learning on the internet right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's not very unique. But what we found from past cohorts and previous students is that, to this, you come out with a cohort of folks who you can stay in touch with over Slack. It's a very human element, and you can kind of grow together, not only in the course, but also beyond in that community. And so a lot of people stay in touch, and we have cohorts that still get together. So that's kind of the cool element, is the human aspect of our non-asynchronous content, our virtual classroom lessons and synchronous learning.
Absolutely. Well, it goes back to the example we talked about with learning to do a backflip. You could go online, you could do all this stuff. I'm sure all the information is probably available somewhere online, but you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. You're going to have to figure out what's good, what's bad. But that cohort is huge. Having that support group, all that stuff, absolutely critical. I think that's a huge benefit of cohort-based learning like this. So awesome, man. So where can they find that if somebody wants to go and sign up? Where do they go? Do you have a link or something you could share?
Yeah. Just go to growthdesigners.co. We got a link on there for school. I believe it's growthdesigners.co/school. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, head over there, growthdesigners.co. You can find it there. You can join our Slack community as well. We obviously talk about it there. But, use a promo code for 10% off this upcoming cohort. Just use the promo code BEYOND.
Sweet. You made one for us.
Yeah, I did.
Love it. All right, cool. Yeah, so check out growthdesign.co, use the code BEYOND, and you said 10% off? That's awesome.
10% off.
Well, so if you're interested in growth design, I think this is a good opportunity to learn some skills from some masters themselves. Don't try to do the backflip on your own. Go find a coach and learn to do the backflip with a trusted partner. Awesome, dude. All right, man. So I've got a series of questions that I like to ask all my guests to help my listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. Are you ready? 5 simple little questions.
I'm ready.
First thing
Let's
that comes
go.
to your mind. You don't have to think too hard about it. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
Oh, there's so many good ones. I recently read a book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if you've heard about this. It just came out earlier this year. It's pretty topical, I guess. I don't know if it's like my favorite book of all time, but it's topical. It's top of mind. But it's about
the recency bias, whatever you read last.
Of course.
There it is.
Yeah, it's a really interesting book that talks about how like phone-based childhood rather than a play-based childhood nowadays. So as a new father I just had my second. I'm starting to think about like how do I want to parent, things like that. So it's been a little top of mind for my spouse and I.
Right on. I'm gonna have to look into this book. Yeah, because it's interesting. Like, I don't know how old you are. I'm 42. I was born in 1982. I didn't get
80s baby too.
Okay, yeah, I didn't get a cell phone until I was in high school, maybe '98, and it was simple little phone. Literally, all you could do was talk to people. I didn't get a smartphone until I was well after college, dude. Like, God, I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, iPhone came out with 2008, so it would have been around then. I didn't have like the first gen either, so I was like a few years late. So I didn't have like to well into my adulthood, and I can't even imagine being a kid right now and
Oh,
just sitting on a couch all day. I mean, I had Nintendo, but
can't.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it
yeah.
was a little different. It was like on the family TV. It was like everyone, someone else to watch TV, get the hell out of here, go outside and play. It's a lot
Yeah.
different than having this little portable device I could take anywhere. So I don't know, man. That's crazy. I need to read that book.
It's pretty wild. Yeah. I think the four tenets, if I remember them correct, is like the author basically has like, all the kind of the research to back it up, but he says like no smartphones till age 13.
Mhm.
No social media specifically till you're 16. Just because
Yeah. God,
those formative years is like, oh,
my
like,
kids
I can't
aren't
even
getting social
imagine.
media until they're 33. That's when they're getting their social media.
Right? And then I think the biggest one is like no phones in school. He's talked about like if you have your phone even in your pocket or away from you, like in your backpack, you still think about it.
Yeah.
It needs to be like away
For
from
sure.
your body. Like they have like little cubbies in some schools,
Yeah,
but like even
yeah.
just like no phones in school at all, I think is a interesting.
Dude, I know we're going so far off topic, but like for me, dude, even like for me, I am my wife is constantly on me like, get off your damn phone. You're a bad influence with the kids. You like put it away. Like one of the
I
things
think we all
like
said, yeah, we all
I
we all
know.
said that.
And I'm like, I'm considering like I'm gonna get a dumb phone so bad, dude. Like just one of those simple little phone T9 text, like But like
Yeah.
my only issue is they don't do group messaging. So I get, I don't know. I tried it a while ago. I don't know if you've done this, but when someone sends a group message, you get an individual text, and then when you reply, or if you send a group message, it sends out a message to each individual person individually, and they reply to each individual text. So you can't do group texting unless you have an app like WhatsApp maybe, but like some dumb phones actually do have WhatsApp. But man, that is like the one thing, and I was like, I could do this easily if I just had
We'll get
group texting, which is like blows my mind. It's like why? You read every review about dumb phones like, oh well, it's great, but it doesn't do group text. Anyway, I need to get like a phone or something that figures that out. If you're listening and you can make that happen, please do. But my wife would probably send you a very nice gift if you could figure that out. But all right, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
Honestly, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts. Now I only listen to Beyond UX. No, I'm just.
I said non-design. No, I'm kidding.
Oh yeah.
You don't need to butter me up.
I'm a pretty avid listener of All In. It's a business and VC podcast, but I'm sure many listeners probably seen that.
Right on. And I'm sure as a growth designer, that one's probably critical.
Kind of speaks to my business.
Yeah, exactly.
Soul.
Yeah, I love it. All right, what is your favorite meal? Now, this could be something you cook, something you had at a restaurant, something your grandma used to cook.
I wish I was a good
Favorite
cook. When we lived in San Francisco, my favorite restaurant is Foreign Cinema. And they have this pork chop with the sour cherry glaze that just so good. So for all those SF-based designers, go check that out. If you haven't been to Foreign Cinema, go check it out when you're there.
Cinema, okay. Oh, I love a good like fruit, like compote or fruit sauce with like a pork chop. It's like nice. I don't know what it is about pork chops. Like I would never do that on a steak or anything, but like pork chop, perfect. Yeah. Makes sense. I don't know why. All right. What is your favorite vacation spot?
So I live in Salt Lake City, so I'm a mountain guy. I love all things mountain sports, but I do like to change it up with the beach vacation. So we were just down in Laguna Beach for the last couple weeks.
Nice.
At a little beach house down there. So
right on. How far is Salt Lake City from the beach? Is that you have to fly? Can you drive? Is it that far? I'm not picturing Salt Lake City in relation to the beach.
We flew this last time, and we had our two kids, and we were like, oh, what are we doing? But it was only an hour and a half from Salt Lake.
That's not bad. So, non-stop flight. Yeah.
Not too bad.
Yeah, I've only done one flight with my kids, and it was actually one kid. It was before I even had the second kid, and it was a nonstop from New Orleans or Orlando. We went to Disney World, but like I couldn't imagine layovers with like kids, especially young kids. Like if you could do a nonstop flight, it's probably not bad, but layovers, dude, oh my god, like I just can't even imagine the mess that would. Jesus, we drive everywhere, dude. Anytime we go anywhere, we drive because I
think
just
we're gonna
couldn't
get to
imagine.
that point pretty soon here.
We got a minivan,
we just
dude.
moved
So it's kind of nice.
So.
It's kind of
Yeah, we're
nice, but
closer to family now. We can drive to most of them now.
there you go. I love it. All right, man. What is your favorite? All right, sorry. All right, last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not?
Ooh, as a growth designer, I love a good analytics platform, your mixed panels, your amplitudes.
Amplitude? Yeah, I like Amplitude a lot.
For SQL, anybody who knows anything about SQL, I love Metabase. I am a very rudiment. I do not know how to the SQL query very well, but I do love partnering with data science. I feel like they can get you so many good, like if you have data science in your company, do partner with them often because they can help you start to really understand the usage of your product. So I love partnering with data science to get some good analytics. So that's
Yeah, hell
probably
yeah,
my
dude.
favorite tool outside of thinking.
Right
Probably
on.
as far away from visual design as you could get.
Hey, dude, that counts. That counts. It's definitely on the list. All right, dude. Awesome. Well, Scott, this has been amazing chatting with you today. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting about all this stuff. I think it's really important. Going wide, going deep, going wide, going deep, that cycle. We even talk like double diamond, but I think it's, I could even see this happening multiple times throughout your career. I mean,
Yeah.
we talk 5 years here, multiply that by what? I don't know how long people work. You got to work until you're at least 60 something. So, how many times could you go wide and go deep? The quintuple diamond? I don't know, like 80, whatever. I don't know, not good at math, dude. That's why I'm a designer. But I think it's just such an important thing to kind of think about. And I love that idea, the framework that you had with, conscious incompetence and unconscious and how do you kind of move throughout your career. I think that's a really great framework to kind of think about. So thanks again for coming on. I think this is really important. But one more time, before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find you and Growth School and all that stuff. One more time, one more plug before we get out of here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a message there. You can also join our Slack community, growthdesigners.co. We have about 3,000 growth designers in there. And so, yeah, you can DM me directly after joining the community.
Cool. And is the Slack community free, or do you only get that if you sign up? Free community. Right on. That's awesome, dude. Cool. Awesome. All right, Scott. Well, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it, man.
You bet. Thanks, Jeremy.